Hi, everyone. I'm Tom Lerman. I'm the academic director of the Hudson River Valley Institute at Marist University.
And also a professor of history and Hudson Valley history at Marist. So I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone for coming here today for what is going to be a very enjoyable and innovative and thoughtful panel. Today's panel, as you would know from the materials, is called Unlocking History: Innovative Approaches to Preservation and Public Engagement. Today's program is presented by the Delaware and Hudson Canal Historical Society and the Hudson River Valley Institute at Marist University. I've been at Marist for over 30 years and a student. It's going to take a long time before I make that change. The mission of the Delaware and Hudson Canal Historical Society is to explore the history of the D&H Canal, its people, its economy, its social impact, and the lasting influence the canal has had. It does this through a variety of programs and exhibits, programs like the ones we're having today, and covering a broad range of topics relevant to the region and to the nation. The mission of the Hudson River Valley Institute at Marist University is to study the history and culture of the Hudson River Valley. It's not only its history, its artistic culture, its literary, economy, all the things that are related to that. We do that at the Hudson River Valley Institute in a variety of different ways. We have also partner with organizations on lecture series and symposiums and panels like this. We have a digital library, a variety of other programming, students, as well as the journal, the Hudson River Valley Review, which is published twice a year, a peer-reviewed journal, which several of the people here at the table have authored. And in fact, Bill Merchant has one when we focus on the Delaware and Hudson Canal. So a couple different, I also want to thank the Marist University Media Center for all of their help in arranging all of this and making sure that we have a video history of it as well. And also want to thank M&T Bank and the Shawangunk Valley Conservancy for their generous support to making today's event possible. Finally, though, a very special thanks to Peter Bienstock right up here in the front row. As in so many different events, it's his guidance which has really set a tone for the Hudson River Valley, for the Hudson River Valley Institute, in which he served as a senior board member for many, many years. He is known for bringing many different groups together to not only study culture, but the history of a region. So special thanks to Peter for organizing this today. So what are we doing today? The historic sites and museums around the country have been under constant and seemingly endless pressure to maintain their mission, interpret their past, preserve their collections and holdings, and if that wasn't enough, to also engage the public and increase visitation and visitors. Sites across the country have witnessed declining numbers of visitors and various needs to find new ways to attract visitors. Not all institutions around the country have faced this, but by and large, probably more have than not. Now, here in the Hudson Valley, we have been blessed, of course, because we have a rich history, dozens and dozens of very famous and some less famous historic sites, real gems, locations, collections, and more. As the United States Congress said back in the 1990s, the Hudson River Valley, when it was introduced as the first national heritage area in the United States back in 1996, Joint Act of Congress signed by then President Bill Clinton, 13 major historic regions were introduced. The Hudson River Valley was number one. It wasn't done in alphabetical order. The Hudson River Valley was recognized for its significant and ongoing contributions to American history and culture. Just to put that in context, other historic regions which were introduced, like the Lowell to Lynn, New England industrial road pathway there, the Antietam battlefield, these were very important national heritage areas as well. And they were recognized, but they're recognized really for specific events, either a big battle or something like industrialization. The Hudson River Valley was recognized again for all of the many different attributes that it had and brought to the table. It's very unique history, the indigenous peoples that were here in the 16th and 17th century, the many different groups which settled in the valley. The only one of the 13 original colonies which had not been originally settled by England, in which English was not the first spoken language, Dutch, French Huguenots, obviously the English. The importance of the American Revolution to this region, and this region as a very significant metaphor for American culture with the Hudson River painting, the Hudson River writers in the 19th century as well. So my point on all that is, While regions around the country are running into difficulties in terms of historic sites, finding the right mix of things to bring folks in, and that's true to some degree here in the Hudson Valley, we have something really big to fall back on, a great story and a richness of historic organizations as well. And that's something which I think we'll hear a little bit about today, but also it puts things into context in terms of why the Hudson Valley has so much to offer. So today's session, we're hoping will promote some dialogue and some new approaches to preservation and to historic sites. So some of the questions we hope to address are, what new approaches are we employing at historic sites and beyond to keep folks interested, visiting, and informed? So each panelist today, who I'll introduce in just a minute, will have a few minutes to present some ideas and some projects that they are trying or have seen attempted and have been successful, and perhaps even not as successful as we originally hoped, but even learning from that to kind of continue to improve. Now, a quick intro of our panelists, which can be found, of course, on the master sheet, which everyone should have access to right there on the counter. I'm going to go in the order, just go to my left. Bill Merchant is Deputy Director for Collections and Historians and Curator of the D&H Canal Historical Society, and he's President of the D&H Transportation Heritage Council, and as I pointed out, an author in the Hudson River Valley Review. Eddie Moran, to his left, is the historian for Ulster County, which he's been in since about fall, I believe. For several years, he managed and oversaw historical interpretation at the Huguenot Historic Street, brought my class there in the fall, matter of fact, brought another class there after the great presentation that was given at Huguenot. And he also worked on a project recently on the American Revolution that we're doing with the State Museum and the State Historian as well. And the third speaker down at the end of the table, we're just going to move this a bit, is Devin Lander, the New York State Historian, head of museum chartering of the State Education Department, and also co-editor of New York History. Previous to the position he is in now, he was executive director of the Museum Association of New York. In addition to his own research on experimental art communities in New York, I just finished editing with Devin a study on the 250th anniversary of the Revolution in New York, which will be coming out later this year, or probably early next year. So as promised, I'm going to have each speaker speak maybe for about 10, 12 minutes, roughly, no more than 15. Each will go in the order that I just described. When they're done, then we'll open it up to questions, any questions you may have, or any comments that you have as well, perhaps some other ideas to add and to share. So let me start off by handing it over to Bill Merchant.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you all for joining us today. We just had a wonderful presentation by the man to my left here, Devin Lander. It's wonderful to join you all here today. You know, you were talking about challenges. I read somewhere recently that Pat Ryan's previous congressional district has more cultural institutions than New York City. So one challenge, and it's not really a challenge, but we're not really competitors, but there's a lot of really, really great institutions out there, all trying to tap into the same sources of revenue. And that's a huge, you know, on one hand, it's a benefit because we try and do stuff together. For you, the general public, although I think most of you are involved in this more, you're not just the unwashed public. It's also wonderful because you don't want for things to do, right? There's a lot of wonderful places where you can both be entertained and educated. And I always like to say when we talk about this business, you are in the entertainment business, people. If you don't see it that way, because that's the dollar you're competing for. As cultural institutions, we want to educate, but if you're not entertaining, you're probably going to lose your audience. You know, so the more entertaining you can be, and fun. You know, fun is an underappreciated. Not in my life. I have a lot of fun, but I think fun is an unappreciated part of what we all try and do, and I think that the effectiveness of what we try and do. If you make it enjoyable, you reach your audience. If I'm effective as a speaker, I really try and look at the people, and I love it if they give me something back. Pull them into it, make it interesting, make them part of it. We all face many challenges. Certainly when COVID hit, we were, you know, what are you going to do? Nobody knew what it seems like it was way in the past, but it's actually still with us. We were kind of fortunate. Within 2 weeks of the world closing down, we had a special staff meeting because, the staff meets every week. We've got a wonderful staff, great people, all with many, many talents, and that really helps too. You need to have more than a single talent in this business. You might have seen me taping video earlier today, for instance. We called a staff meeting, and in the staff meetings, we'd always said, the internet, we got to do more on the internet. Well, when COVID hit, we just said, now we have no excuse. And DNH TV was born. And DNH TV is just what we dubbed our YouTube channel. It just has a little more zazz, right? And out of the gate, we were able, for a variety of reasons, to produce content pretty quickly. I like to tell everybody I spent all of COVID walking around in the woods talking to myself. Something that God made me for, I say. One of the wonderful things about our history that I think a lot of my colleagues don't have is I tell a story that's in the ground today. You can go out there, you can go and learn. I learn things every day if I'm out, and I love to hike, I need the exercise, but there's nothing more enjoyable than hiking in a place that also has DNH remains, in my case, but remains of our past in general. So DNH TV has become a huge way for us to meet people. Since DNH TV, YouTube, our channel is up to 1,000 visitors, or 1,000 people subscribed. We have 3,000 Facebook followers now, 2,000 Instagram followers, and I argue we're not doing enough with those things. So certainly it took COVID, which seemed like a horrible thing, but it was also an opportunity, and we were fortunate that we sort of seized that opportunity and came out of the gate, and now DNH TV has got over 100 offerings. Our excellent president, Peter Bienstock, initiated a Makers of History lecture to try and broaden and to celebrate these wonderful people that are doing amazing work, both national and international. So I'd love to tell this story. Recently, last year, a brilliant woman by the name of Clara Sousa Silva, who teaches at Bard. She was from Oxford, was it, Peter?
From Harvard, Smithsonian, Harvard joint effort.
Alien Life and How to Find It. When we put that up on YouTube, 25,000 views. Now, prior to this, we got 1,000, 1,500. Our best performer is I'm proud to say, is a lecture that I did on the D&H Canal for a library in Cold Spring. But it was the one general history of the D&H at the time. And that's maybe I haven't checked lately. I'm not that narcissistic, just a little. But 25,000 views. Amazing, but that really opened up our reach. So it's interesting when you do these things, who would have thought that, we'd have a thing on alien life? And by the way, she concludes that, just a quick thing, this isn't history exactly, she's studying light, and from light you can tell the chemical signature coming off of stars. And there's a molecule called phosphine, and this is only produced by life. And her conclusion was, there's no life, we would have seen it. If you've been paying attention 2 weeks ago, on the cover of the New York Times, they found the sign of life. So it was wonderful too so it's nice when we tell history, but we also are trying to open it up. As I say, I'm fortunate though, because we have a history where you can go out and see it today. We do tours of the 5 Block Walk, and people love that. Again, you get to walk and study history. And one other innovation that sort of came, he's not here, Matt Berlin, one of our younger board members, was really into Google Maps. So he started a map of the D&H Canal, and then he handed it off to me. Our D&H story map, we call it, accessible to everybody, is you can follow along. If you want to go out and see the D&H Canal, and there are many, many public trails that you can hike on, they're all on this map. When we produce a video on the site, we link it. When I find a new photograph on that site, so it's this living document. And so we're spreading our story electronically using these different, the wonderful technology that we've got available to us. It's sort of funny to talk about a 19th century history and then on my website, So that's been really, really powerful, and it's only going to get better. Anytime I get to sit and talk to people, Open Space Institute, and I guess, Bob, you still here? Open Space Institute has initiated the New York O&W Rail Trail project, but it's really the New York O&W D&H Trail. They're going to have a continuous trail, 68 miles, from Port Jervis, New York to Accord, and a lot of it's on the D&H. And so wonderful things are happening. So we're encouraging people to get out on the trails, to learn their histories, all through these little bits of with a very small staff, with minuscule budget. I was wondering how much any of us would talk about the challenge of money. I think it goes without saying, that's one of our biggest challenges. But we're fortunate to have a really great board that are a lot of wonderful, talented people who support us. And we keep trying to figure out different ways to reach out and tell this story. For those of you who don't know, the D&H Canal, immensely important American story. Largest coal company in America, exploiting 3/4 of all the world's anthracite coal is in northeastern Pennsylvania. An astounding statistic, and the D&H was the largest producer in the 19th century. The D&H made New York City happen every bit as much as the Erie Canal. And so we're happy to have, obviously, any forum I get to spread that story. But I'm particularly, watch the papers. It's going to take a while, especially with federal funding freezing up. But there's going to be a wonderful D&H trail. But if you want to explore more of it, we're out there. We're not just a bricks and mortar museum. We have a wonderful museum, as a lot of you got to see. The rest of you, we're open till 4 if you want to stop by later. And we hope that you'll come support us and enjoy and have fun. Was that 12 minutes?
All right, Bill, thank you very much. Why don't we just continue to move to the left, and Eddie Moran.
Sure. Thank you again, everyone, for being here. As was so nicely said, my name is Eddie Moran. I currently serve as the county historian for Ulster County. I previously was a public historian at Historic Huguenot Street down in New Paltz. And in one sense, I wanted to just, start out with the idea that me being in this position is, in a degree, an innovation in its own right. Ulster County actually did not have a full-time county historian, as likely most or many of you know, until my appointment about 6 months ago. My predecessor, Jeff Miller, is in this room. He did incredible work with the resources given to him, but having someone that is just full-time, available to the public, and also full-time in the sense that they have the proper time and resources to do the duties of the job is in itself an innovation. I think we can kind of take that for granted here in the Hudson Valley, because we have 3 full-time county historians that I can think of off the top of my head here in just the mid-Hudson. But in that sense, it's really still a new position. And I wanted to start with that also because part of my job as Ulster County historian is to be a resource to all of you, most of you, many of you, very likely, looking at my Ulster County folks. But I think one thing I wanted to shout out was Jeff Miller, in his time in the position, I think did something that was, very creative. With the limited resources he did have available to him, he said, well, okay, there are many duties of a county historian. I'm going to focus on the one that's doable with these resources. And I'm going to try and cultivate a supportive network of town historians, of historic sites here in Ulster County. And I wanted to use that to kind of lead into the first of 3 challenges and innovations that I wanted to talk about in this brief introduction. And those are kind of the idea of cohesion and cooperation, and within that, access to historic materials across different historic sites here in the county. I wanted to talk a bit about expanding our narrative to ensure that all the history that took place in this county is included as we build on a foundation of history that was provided for us by predecessors. And I also wanted to talk about just the overall challenge that Bill also mentioned of just staying relevant. How do you still draw interest and engagement from the public? And in one sense, the first challenge I mentioned, cohesion, is one that is especially relevant to my position. Ulster County is a very large place. It is a place that also is incredibly diverse, not just in the people that live there, but in its culture across different communities, in the kind of socioeconomics of different communities. I come from New Paltz, a small town with more people living in it than the city of Hudson. And there are parts of Ulster County, there are towns like Hardenburg, that are multiple times the acreage of New Paltz and have less than 500 people living in them. So you can imagine, pretty diverse, having to tie all of this together. But the one challenge I mentioned in terms of access within that challenge of cohesion, access to historic materials is one I wanted to talk about. Because it may be surprising to some folks from the public that are here, to many of you it's not surprising, to hear that and know that to research a specific site, you're going to records that are oftentimes outside of that site. We all know as well the limited resources that historic sites often have and the very real challenges and pressures they're under. And we also all know the very, I'm trying to think of the right word, the very different collecting practices that our predecessors would have been doing at these institutions 50 years ago, right? And so because of that, you might be at the Ulster County Historical Society in Marbletown, and you might think to yourself, I want to see the documents from the man who built this home. And you would find that those aren't there. You would find they're at Historic Huguenot Street. And you kind of see what I'm getting at here. And so one thing I wanted to shout out was digitization. Many of you have likely heard of a project that has been underway in New Paltz, of which I'm going to kind of shout out others. This is not an innovation I'm directly doing or involved in. But there's been a project underway for a few years with funding from the National Endowment for the Humanities at a time when that is at risk, and it's vital we all know about this and support that. It's a cooperative effort between the Library in New Paltz, the Research Center at the Library in New Paltz, the Haviland Heidgert Historical Collection, between the town of New Paltz, the Reformed Church of New Paltz, and Historic Huguenot Street, to digitize tens of thousands of pages of their archival documents there. And so suddenly, whereas it might not have been possible for someone from a place like the Ulster County Historical Society to access those documents, maybe Huguenot Street does have the staff to allow them to come and access those in that research appointment. Maybe Huguenot Street does have their archives organized in a way that's accessible enough that they know what's down there and how to access it. Many of you know that that's not the case at every place, right? But even if that's the case, that doesn't mean that the County Historical Society has the staff, the time, and the resources to send one of their staff members there to do that research. And now I can go online and look at that digitized account book from the man who built the stone house that's now the Historical Society, and we can draw out new information from that. And we can also, I think within this, another kind of instance of cohesion I wanted to talk about and chat about was the idea that there's oftentimes a bit of a disconnect between us here in the room, in terms of those of us that work in public history, and individuals who might be researching this history, scholars, who might be doing that at universities. We're blessed to be here in the Hudson Valley, where we have a number of universities here, where they have incredible history departments. And so it's not surprising we have close relationships with them. But one woman, I would argue, is one of the best, if not the best, historian on enslavement in Dutch New York right now. She's at the University of New Orleans. The man I would say is the best historian or knows the most, the expert on the Europeans who founded New Paltz, is at UNC Chapel Hill. And so with the internet, with this digitization, those individuals now have a greater ease of being able to access these documents. With the internet and communication through it, we now have a greater ease of being able to access that research from those scholars, and a greater ease of being able to bring it in and learn from their approaches as well. So there was just a presentation last night at Historic Huguenot Street by a scholar named John Michael Smith. John Michael Smith and his co-author of a book called Munsee Indian Trade in Ulster County, Keesyan Waterman, looked at account books from a 18th century trader in the town of Rochester, and were able to draw out incredible depth of information on the Esopus native people of our region from the listings of those people in the account books. And so I'm kind of leading in from the first challenge, or first innovation, into the second one of expanding this narrative. Because as we have this greater access, we also have the ability to go back and either draw in new information that people didn't think was important enough to draw in previously, or go back to revisit documents that might have already been researched, but not with the angle we would have today. The account books of the man who built the building that's now the Ulster County built the building that was there before it was the Ulster County Historical Society. I misspoke before. But that man, he was trading in the mid-18th century. People have worked on that account book. Specifically, there's a fantastic architectural history of the house based off it. I looked at the work that John Michael Smith and Keesyan Waterman did, and I thought to myself, I wonder if anyone ever looked at those account books, not just to draw out more information on the County Historical Society. I wonder if he was trading with native people. I wonder if he listed enslaved people in there. I wonder if the County Historical Society could tell me the names of the people that were enslaved on their property. And they couldn't. And no one had looked at those account books for that information. And sure enough, there he is, Louis Bevere Jr. in the 1750s, trading with a native woman named Yaniti from the Esopus people in Marbletown. There's the information that an enslaved man named Sambo did a portion of the labor to build the North Marbletown Reformed Church. If you would look that up, if you look it up right now online, you'll see Louis Bevere Jr. listed as the builder of the North Marbletown Reformed Church. He did do a great portion of it. And within this kind of expansion of access to these documents, expansion of access to one another, to learn and build off of one another's work, with this kind of expansion of the narrative, we also have the ability to engage descendants and people who inherit the legacy of that history who might not have been able to engage with it previously. For instance, I am blessed to have grown up in the place where my family has lived for hundreds and hundreds of years. My family has descendants going back to the founders of Huguenot Street, and I think it's a privilege that my family managed to stay in that place for so long. There are tens of thousands of descendants of those family across the country. And then we can think about, well, in 1790, there was 15% of New Paltz, that's an approximation, 12 to 15%, of that population were people of color who were enslaved. Are they still living in New Paltz? Probably not. I know that, for the most part, no. We now have the ability to engage with and access their descendants in a way we would not have necessarily had previously. Those descendants who might be living in a place like Rochester, Schenectady, or California can now access these documents and look at them from where they are. Bill mentioned online talks also, where now those individuals can access this history. And to shout, I think maybe an equally, if not more important example of this, where are the Native people who lived here today? They're not around here today, and I will say that. They are not around here today. They live in federally recognized nations in Wisconsin, Oklahoma, and Ontario, Canada. You can imagine that even if we endeavored to fully incorporate their information and their history from the records we have, you can imagine that we're never going to get to a depth of knowledge we would get if we were doing that work alongside their descendants. Their descendants today still keep up traditional fishing practices in Ontario that their ancestors would have used here hundreds of years ago. If you go to a powwow of the Haudenosaunee people, you'll likely hear a song called the Delaware Skin Dance that we can say with a good deal of certainty was performed by the Esopus people here pre-contact. We wouldn't know that if not for their descendants. And even if I can look at a document and draw a great depth of information from it, we're not going to learn as much as we otherwise would if not for working with their descendants. And it gives us the ability to also bring in their descendants to facilitate relationship building, to try and give them access to this historical record that they should have equal entitlement to give them access to this land that they should have equal entitlement to as well. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was staying relevant in just this initial introduction. And the things I've talked about so far, especially that idea of expanding the narrative, I want to make the argument to you all that that in itself is an innovation that will help you stay relevant. I think it's probably pretty safe to say I'm the closest, if not the youngest person in this room. This is what my generation's drawn to, and I will say that concretely and with certainty. My generation is far more likely to be drawn to history that's expanding the narrative and introducing an innovative interpretation of a story that was selective in the past than we are to be drawn to something that's more great man history. And I wanted to just make that argument kind of as a concluding point to you all, that expanding these narratives, kind of doing history for reasons of justice, trying to remember that we need to think about how this is relevant to the world today and how it improves the world today, is also the way by which you build not just kind of general interest in the public, but you build interest in the public for the people that'll be here in 50 years. And so I thank you all again for being here. I'm so excited for all the questions and discussion portions, and I'll pass it off to Devin.
Thank you to Eddie for his presentation, and as promised, our third speaker, and then we'll open it up for questions and comments, is the historian of the state of New York, Devin Lander.
Thank you, Tom, and thanks, Bill and Eddie. First of all, I want to concur with everything that you both said, especially Bill's point about being engaging, right, when we do this as public historians, museum people, working with the public. It's important, and I would argue writers too of history. It's important to be engaging, right? We want an audience. We need an audience, otherwise we shrivel and disappear. And then, of course, Eddie's points are all well taken, I think, and certainly where the field is right now as far as expanding the narrative on all types of history, right? Which I would argue is just doing accurate history, right? Selective history is not accurate history, by the way. So I would want to concur with that. One of the things that I want to talk about here is just some representations of many of which you hopefully know So I'm not telling you anything new, but I want to highlight the opportunity for partnership, specifically with your local tourism promotion agencies. And if we're concerned, as we all are and should be, about resources and lack thereof, and the, I would say the assault right now on history and museums at every level of the federal government, one of the opportunities, if we haven't tapped into it yet, is our tourism promotion agencies. And I want to focus on 3 projects that are related to the 250th that are happening at the local level. Again, hopefully I'm not telling this crowd anything you don't know, but all 3 of these projects are being done either fully supported by or at least partially supported by the local tourism promotion agencies in the counties or localities. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is that the tourism industry sees what we do and what you all do who work in historic sites and museums as part of their matrix of attractions, right? The reason for people to come and visit the location, the state, whatever. And so if that relationship is cultivated, it can lead to the acquisition of resources. I will start with this one, which hopefully you can see. I can't really see the screen, but how many people have seen this project through Dutchess County history? So this is actually on the Tourism Promotion Agency's website, but this is a project that was a project between the Historical Society and the county historian, Will Tatum, and their local TPA. And this is I can't really show you this. I can show you the website, but I can't download the thing. But if you go to the QR code, you can download Tiny George, who is this gentleman here, who was an actor who portrays George Washington that they hired using tourism funds. And you can make him stand on this Tiny George thing, and you can cheers him at different bars around. And here's the map of the location. And for those of you that know Will, you can find out more about it, or you can go to their website. But this is a partnership between the historical enterprise and the historical entities and these businesses and the tourism promotion agency for the county. So it's something that is attractive to various audiences, people who are passionate about history, maybe, people who are passionate about drinking, maybe, and they're, in between. So I saw Will present, and I'm not remembering the Dutchess County Tourism. Yes, they presented at the 250th conference that we did in Saratoga County last year, and they were just kind of getting this together and rolling it out. And I was struck by bringing, the collaboration and the combination of business and tourism promotion and history, right? This is the kind of thing that we're all looking to do. Now, Will would be best suited to tell you how successful it is. I really don't know. I've played with it. I think it looks cool. They certainly have designed a cool augmented reality George Washington that will speak, and you can actually turn your phone, and it's like 360 degrees. It's really cool. But this is a type of thing that, again, is a representation of collaboration between the tourism promotion entity and the historical society, and then, of course, the businesses. Another one that's been up and running for quite a while now, a few years, is Saratoga County's 250th. Obviously, Saratoga County, they're marketing themselves as the turning point. I would argue that they're correct in that regard. I don't know if Tom would correct me in that, but he's the real expert. But everyone knows or should know the importance of the Battle of Saratoga as the turning point in the American Revolution. Well, Saratoga County was very quick in realizing that the 250th for Saratoga County was going to be a very important anniversary. So they've been putting resources into the 250th, not only their commission, which they have a county commission, but also resources related to tourism promotion and augmented reality. They've been doing a series of videos. They've been doing programming, of course, in-person programming around the county. As you can see, they have a broad swath of support from local elected officials, from the county and beyond. Again, an example of a relationship between in this case, it's the county historian is kind of leading this, Lauren Roberts. She's leading the initiative, but it's more than just her. They have a commission. They have teachers involved. Again, the major tourism promotion agency for Saratoga County is involved. They've created a 501c3 to be able to fundraise and do a lot of these programs. But one of the things, as we can see, that Eddie brought up is highlighting the untold stories of the battles and the role of Saratoga in the revolution, the role of Benedict Arnold, and on and on. Women, they have a Women in War symposium that they've been doing the last few years, bringing together scholars and historians, public historians, to talk about the role of women, the role of free blacks, the enslaved in some cases, certainly indigenous people, all of that, a microcosm of the larger story of New York and the Revolution that we're also telling in our exhibit, and I'll talk a little bit about our exhibit too, but I just wanted to build on what Eddie was saying. The untold, or the whole history, as State Parks calls it, to me is the accurate history, right? It's telling the history, right? You cannot tell the story of the American Revolution anywhere, but certainly not in New York, without telling the indigenous story, right? They were the other empire, right? Like, they defined the entire, as Tom, I'm sure, knows more than I do. But so making sure that those types of stories are told, and that in doing so, I would also agree with Eddie, and this is one of the things that I argued at the state level when we were doing our field guide and creating the state commission, is that in that way you're also going to build audience, right? Because there are people of various types who, their story, or the story of their ancestors, or the story of people like them had not ever been told or ever been commemorated in previous commemorations, the bicentennial, the 150th. And, there also tend to be people who aren't interested in this, because they don't see themselves in this story, right? And to me, that's a huge problem with the accuracy, because we know certainly women were involved. We know indigenous people were involved. We know free blacks and enslaved African Americans existed. New York was a slave state and colony for 200 years. We know these things, so we should be telling that part of the story, because that's the accurate history. But in doing so, I think you could say maybe an unintended consequence, but I think it really should be an intended consequence, is to build the audience of the people that care about this history and care about the historic sites, care about the accurate history being taught in schools or not. Unfortunately, we're seeing right now the results of this type of work being seen as low-hanging fruit, right? There's a reason the NEH was completely stopped, and there's a reason the IMLS was completely stopped at the federal level. And my argument to the reason is that not enough people care, right? There's not enough people that care. That's seen as low-hanging fruit, and it's seen that way at the state level too. I know for a fact. I've sat in those meetings, and we as a field have to do a better job maximizing and telling people what the value is. And I think we do that by having bigger audiences, more diverse audiences that are coming to our programs, coming to our sites, and care about whether or not these sites have resources and whether or not these sites have the support at the government level and at the local level. So that's my plug for that. But these are examples of organizations that are doing that. Saratoga County has, for those of you who don't know, and you probably all know Saratoga County, but Saratoga County obviously has the horse track, right? They're a major tourism area in the state of New York. But they also get, at least right now, their elected leadership gets the importance of their history too. And they want to build I've spoken several times with the county. He's not a county executive, he's a county manager. He's appointed by the Board of Supervisors for the county. But anyway, I've talked with him, and he wants Saratoga Battlefield to have 10 times the attendance that it has now every year. Because it's really not highly attended. That's kind of a little secret. It's not anywhere near what it should be for its importance. So that, because he gets it, right? It generates revenue, but it's also beyond that, I think. The conversations I've had with him and others at that county they really want that history preserved. They really, it's an important piece of history. So, for them, it checks all the boxes. It's education, it's economics, it's historic preservation, it's natural preservation as well. So, that's another example of an organization that, or in this case, a commission that's really maximizing its relationship not only with elected officials, but with the tourism arm of their operation, and they're all focused on 250 right now, which I wish I could say is the same at the state. Revolutionary Westchester 250 is another one that's been around. These were actually the first, as far as I know. Connie Kehoe, those of you who know Connie, in Westchester County, started this in 2018 as a not-for-profit organization with a special MOU with the county of Westchester. She also works very closely with their tourism promotion entity, and the head of their tourism promotion agency, Natasha Caputo, who is very passionate about this as well. A lot of the work that they've done is related to their mobile tours and audio tours. They also do videos. They have a YouTube channel. Bill mentioned D&H's YouTube channel. That's a great way of getting the word out. They also do exhibits and all these other things. But again, an organization that is heavily partnered with the Tourism Promotion Agency. In fact, they just got a Market New York grant. There is money that can be dedicated to museum history work through Market New York grants, which are I Love New York grants, tourism promotion grants, partnering with the Tourism Promotion Agency, applying for the money, getting the money from the state. They just were awarded one for their 250th, in fact. I think the announcement was made in March. So they're going to be doing even more tours and more exhibits and more programming, and again, a partnership with tourism entities. So that's just three examples at the local level. I can talk a little bit about what we're doing at the State Museum as far as our exhibit goes. We have a major exhibit that we're planning that will be done by July of 2026, interpreting New York and the Revolution, which is incredibly hard to do, even in a 7,000 square foot exhibit. How do you tell all of those stories, right? How do you tell all the stories that Eddie mentioned and that Bill has talked about and that I've talked about? Well, one way that we're doing it is, which is innovative for the State Museum, because the State Museum never really, well, I won't say that. It actually once operated this way, and we're operating this way again. We're really reaching out to the communities. For example, we want to tell the indigenous story of New York and the Revolution. We have to. It's a major story. We're not going to do that without indigenous help. We can't do that without Indigenous help. So we've crafted an Indigenous advisory group made up of designated people from Indigenous nations that want to be part of it. Obviously, not all of them want to be part of it. But we have a good group of scholars and other kind of representatives that might be tribal preservation officers in some cases, might be elected parts of Indigenous government in other cases, historians. And, so we're working with them to craft the story. And the other thing that's kind of innovative, at least for us, is we're somewhat stuck in the past sometimes, is we want to tell the story not as a separate thing, like, oh, okay, here, this part of the exhibit's about the Indigenous story. Okay, now you move on to the important stuff. No, that is through all of it. Like, it's part of every part of the story that we want to tell. We also want to tell the story of loyalists, major part of the story in New York. New York was the largest hotbed of loyalism, as Tom will remind us in the book. There's a chapter in the book. But also the role of women, the role of the enslaved, free blacks, the story of, the story of the battles, of course, will be part of it. And we're centering, just a cool aside, we're centering the whole exhibit around a bateau that was discovered in the fill underneath the World Trade Center when it came down, which was a Revolutionary era bateau. We didn't really know what it was. This wasn't me, but the archaeologists they knew generally what it was, but they didn't know the specifics. So they sent it to Texas A&M, which has the big conservation lab. They're the world experts on kind of nautical archaeology stuff, and they've discovered over the past several years working on it that it was built near Philadelphia. They could tell by what type of trees it was and all this great stuff. It was built by the British as a warship and was used in that regard. They know that because there was a button found underneath the planking from a British regiment. There were also shackles found, so they think it may have been used as a prison transport ship in New York Harbor, taking prisoners out to the boats, the larger ships. So anyway, that's going to be the center of the exhibit, and just want to put a plug in for it because it's really cool. It's there now, and it's being reconstructed by the team from Texas A&M. That part, another innovation for us, that part is actually publicly open to the public, so they're there every day putting it together, and you can go and watch them do it. We're not like putting it behind curtains or any of that stuff like may have happened in the past. We're doing it as like we want the public to see this happening. So anyway, that's going to be the centerpiece, and it's an item that really tells that 250 years of history, right? It tells us the role of New York City, not only in the American Revolution and the fact that it was captured by the British. Why was it captured by the British? Why was it targeted? It was the major port in North America, blah, 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 blah. But then the fact that it was targeted 225 years or whatever years later. The only way we would have known that this boat exists was the fact that the Trade Center came down. So that's another story. But my point of this is seeking and looking at collaboration and working with your tourism promotion agents. If you haven't already, make the conversation, start the conversation. If you are already, continue doing it, build on it, try to get Market New York grants for the stuff you're doing. And then also, of course, building on what Bill and Eddie said, continuing to think about your audience, continuing to think about building that audience, using the work and the research and the exhibits that you're doing with the idea of, let's bring in new people, let's bring in people who in the past didn't see themselves in the history, and start those conversations and start those stories. So with that, I will turn it back over to Tom.
Everyone, well, special thank you right across the board to Devin, to Eddie, to Bill for their excellent presentations here today, which we hope will trigger some questions and some comments. As I have some that I'll start off with, but I'm going to put it out to the audience first in terms of any questions. First of all, any specific questions on something that you just wanted to hear more about, and if not that, any questions of a more general nature? Well, right up front here.
Center place for people to come and be directed, and from here would be a great spot to then send everybody, where did you want to go? Because I think people come to some place and then then they're trapped into where they can go. But if they knew there were a center like here, with all the brochures, all the information, all the great stuff that they could see that they would miss if they went to one location, and they would say, where else? So they could get here and see all of the incredible variety. And so the location is good, the facility is proper, and the ability to do that, I think, could be right here at the museum.
Well, our visitor center, what we call the concierge system, actually calls out over 100 local attractions, almost all of them nonprofits. They're not just Ulster County. I keep telling the county we've got the best county tourism center, and we truly do at this point.
He's got more brochures than I have in my. He has more brochures than I have in my county-run museum, just as an example.
So we are trying to get the word out because it is, so in a way, I started out by saying we've got more cultural institutions. How do I know? Because I manage the back end of that. We got over 100 cultural organizations that I know of within 25 miles. But we're there trying to call them out because we're all in this together in a certain way, right? But thanks for the suggestion, Paula.
Yeah, thank you. Especially because also my mind jumps right to what a perfect tie-in it would be to a museum of a transportation system in the county as well. It's just a cool tie-in. And I think that also, it reminds me of another challenge that we face a bit that I should have mentioned earlier that I didn't. But county lines are arbitrary. This is a challenge that's probably pretty specific to me, and less so to my colleagues on either side. But I think about that often. First of all, the county borders were different 75 or hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Newburgh was what it should be, what makes sense and is logical. It was in Ulster County. That was a joke. No one. Thank you. That's what you were supposed to do.
Because I can't find I'm in Montgomery.
Yeah.
And I can't find half of our information.
And that's that kind of access to documents I was talking about. Yeah, and it's also really important with what Devin was talking about with Rev 250, and that's something I wanted to mention as well because, I brought this up in a recent meeting because it was floated, well, why don't we just have one central Rev 250 meeting in Kingston, or event in Kingston? And I said, well, I've lived in Ulster County my whole life, and I wouldn't have been there if I was 18. I would have been in Newburgh, because I grew up in the part of Ulster County that everyone thinks is Orange County. So these borders are kind of arbitrary, and I think that that's a great idea, is trying to come up with creative ways like that we can, create a network, even if the topography and economics don't already make that network, Thank you for that. It's fantastic. I wrote that down, too.
Peter? This is really a knotty problem that I'm aware. When I first got interested in tourism in this area 50 years ago, everybody said state money is allocated by county. The counties want to spend only on what's in their county. Meanwhile, everybody who's planning a trip wants to go to the Hudson Valley. And so what we find, and it's still 50 years later this way, that Ulster County Tourism is less interested, I think, in the concierge system that Bill talked about because it covers the other counties. And their attitude is, why should we fund something that's sending people to Dutchess or Greene or Columbia or Putnam? Well, the answer is, and here I turn to Devin, I think the state really has to rethink how they do this funding and create incentives for the counties to cooperate on tourism development, because it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that's true, and that's an issue for I Love New York, but it's something that I've seen too, just around 250. You're correct that the counties distribute the Market New York grant money, essentially, right? They apply for it. But the tourist doesn't care what county they're going to. They don't know, if they're not from New York, they don't know one from the other. Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think that there are examples around 250, though. Right now, maybe I should have illustrated more. That are project-based that include several counties, like the Knox Trail reenactment, which is happening. Essentially they're Saratoga County, Warren County, Rensselaer County, Albany County are all working together on recreating Knox's Trail of Artillery from Fort Ticonderoga to Boston. So they're working with Massachusetts as well. So there are examples of that. Would they be able to get a Market New York grant for that? Would they, that's the question. So I agree with that, and that's something that, next time I see Ross Levi, I will hit him with.
Well, and too, the biggest, we all look at New York City, 10 million people.
Yeah.
The old joke, New York, if you're 1 in a million, there's 10 of you. They're traveling up from New York City. They're going to go through multiple counties.
Yes.
And so you're targeting this group of presumably well-off people, but you're all trying to do it differently. And in fact, they're not saying, "Oh, I'm going to Ulster." They're saying, "I'm going to the Hudson Valley." They're going to travel the whole valley.
Yeah. I think the Hudson Valley is an extremely regional entity, because you're right. People think of it as the Hudson Valley, right? They don't necessarily.
And they all argue over what's upstate. If you're on Facebook right now, there's all these, no, that's not upstate. No, who cares?
Yeah, but that's, there are other parts of the state that see themselves regionally too. Long Island, the North Country, Western New York. Where's Western New York? That's another question. We argue about where upstate is. Where's Western New York? Where does Western New York begin? So that's a good point.
Thank you.
Chris, do you have a question back there? You do? Okay. Then we'll come back up here.
I saw one.
So, this was great. I've bought into this. I know you've all bought into this. We're all sitting here. We've all bought into this. What's been your experience? What's been your strategy for bringing this to stakeholders, bringing this to people who've been at your site longer than Eddie and I have been alive, longer than, the community that you're in, the town that you're in, the county that you're in, your stakeholders? How do you engage them?
Can I take a stab at that one first? I think one of the things that surprised me the most in my current job, in an area in which kind of most quickly I had to see that I needed to change and improve, was in kind of my expectations of the stakeholders. And I think that kind of how we present it, I think one lesson I've learned, and I think this is just a part of the answer, so it's not going to be a comprehensive answer, Zach, but I think one thing we have to think about is, how are we cultivating stakeholders? And what are our stakeholders, and what is their positionality? And you'll find that probably, based on that, you can get a pretty good predictor of whether they're going to push back to expanding the narrative or not. I was kind of shocked coming into my new position that there were some times where, I'm blessed to work with my predecessor who stayed on part-time and teaches me 8 lessons every day. And one of the lessons I was told by him and a few other people was like, why are you so militant about this? Like, most people are on board with you, dude. Like, why are you like coming into this assuming that they're going to argue with you? And I realized eventually it's because I worked at a museum previously that was built on descendants. And when your stakeholders and funding models and visitation is entirely built on cultivating to the white descendants, and I'll call it out for what I think it is a bit, the entitlement, and not just that they have already, but you're encouraging and cultivating that idea of entitlement in those stakeholders. That when they come to this museum that you've told them is theirs, and they come and they hear that it's also somebody else's and that person has brown skin, they don't get too happy always. And I think that if you cultivate those stakeholders in a very different way of just this history is important, and you can cultivate it in a bunch of different ways. I am kind of lucky to build off a legacy that was left down to me at the county level. So I don't know exactly how they've built it, that the results come to me differently. I haven't had a single bit of pushback in 6 months. Not a single one. And that, I would be lucky if I went through a day of tours at Huguenot Street without somebody saying something, And so I think that in one sense it comes down to like what's the audience we're cultivating? Who are our stakeholders? And if we're, I think continually expanding who those stakeholders and who that audience is, a lot of times I think we might not have that degree of pushback we might otherwise expect. But I think that's just one part of it and not kind of a comprehensive answer necessarily. I don't know if that.
Chris, just like to it.
I was wondering, we have archival materials at Mount Goulian Historic Site in Beacon, and we're trying to transcribe them, which is a really long, involved process because these letters are from the 1600s and the 1700s. Do you know of any tool, software, maybe AI, that would help with transcribing the letters?
I don't as of now, but I can't imagine that it's not on the way with AI. We have a very similar situation, but we have 160 million documents in the state archives and state library. But one that we just kind of rediscovered like 2 weeks ago was a handwritten copy of the Albany Charter of 1754, the proposal to unify the colonies, 20 years before the American Revolution, was rediscovered in the papers of William Johnson, but it's never been transcribed. So it's been partially transcribed by Founders Online, but that's only partial. So we're having it transcribed, but we're having an intern do it, who luckily can read cursive, which is rare. So, yeah, I don't know. Do you know of any
No, I can add to that. Elaine, there is the Institute for the American Philosophical Society with the McNeil Center for Early American Studies did some online tutorials just a few months ago on exactly that, on translate, not from, still in English, from 17th century cursive to a much more readable form. I can go track back because they would have been taped sessions as well, but it was definitely American Philosophical Society and McNeil Center for Early American Studies at the University of Pennsylvania. Okay. And it was being run by experts in terms of this on small projects and then bigger.
Great.
I'll try to track it down.
Okay, thank you.
And I do know that there is an AI, and AI is being so hyped. It's really just computer technology progressing. It's not a great panacea, but there's money to be made if you call it AI, right? But my line has been, some of you might know, I've been taking pictures of correspondence. I've got 23,000 images of correspondence relating to my history. I want AI that can translate cursive. There is one out there. I was checking on my phone. I wasn't checking my email. I thought maybe I wrote it down. There is an AI out there. I don't know how good it is, but reach out to me later because I'll be looking for it as well.
Yeah.
Hi. So hi, I'm Jen Palmentero. I work for the Southeastern New York Library Resources Council, and we've been helping organizations digitize collections for a long time. So I just want to speak to this question a little bit. The tools to decipher handwriting are advancing. They are becoming incorporated into like digital repository software. The results are questionable, but a couple things I want to say right now, if you don't have access to those kinds of tools, Google Tesseract, I think it's called. TESSARCT, something like that. You can Google it, and you'll find it. But like if you upload handwritten documents to Google Drive, so I guess it depends on what you want the transcripts for, but if you just wanted them for yourself, like Google Drive will attempt to provide searching on handwritten documents. So if you upload them there, so again, if it's more internal and you just want to search on them yourself to find something, that could be an option. It's not going to spit back out a transcript for you to then repurpose somewhere else. But again, for your internal research or to make it available to researchers, it could be a very low-cost solution. I've played around with it. The results aren't great. It depends on the handwriting, right? So sometimes it'll only find a date on like a diary that has really bad handwriting. But again, it's something worth trying. There's also a service called From the Page. Yeah, and it used to be free and it's no longer free, but it is a site where you can upload your handwritten documents and you can crowdsource transcriptions. So then you'll be getting them done by people. And to make that successful, you need a campaign, right? You need to find your transcribers, you need to point them to that site. And I don't know the costs, but it's started by a wonderful couple. It's been around for a long time. Again, it's called From the Page. And I don't know their costs, but could be another option for getting them transcribed.
A Google search turns up, Why not? Transcribus seems to be the top one, that with a K. So trans, Kribus. And they've got a thing, but it's not, this seems like the closest currently.
There's someone that has, I think, an answer to that question also up front here.
Answer to this question.
That we were just talking about with the transcription.
I will be back, sir.
Our town of Lloyd historian.
So the LDS, which has this huge family search,
Yes.
they have instituted a new tool. It's an AI tool where it will transcribe the deeds and the wills.
Wow.
And if you go and use that tool, it not only transcribes the deed and the will, it uses all the names in the deed. So if you are looking for a deed for a certain person, they'll do all the adjacent property owners. So this is a really handy tool, and I would look at that, and if you're interested, ask them what they use. But it's pretty impressive. Also, the NARA has a tool that is doing the pension records for Revolutionary War soldiers. So if you look there, it's not as accurate as the LDS tool, but it gives you a long way to getting to where you're going. So those are two tools that researchers are using a lot. The other comment I had was, if you're looking for a central place to contact more people, I wouldn't limit it to historical societies. I do a lot of work on the walkway, and you get a lot of people who come up to the walkway, and then they say, oh, I got a half a day left. What else is there to see?
Right.
And you go over to the rack, and there may be 2 brochures on Ulster County, and one of them is for fishing. So, I think there's opportunities there.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. I should add that the way I got something transcribed, we got donated Russell Farnham Lord, the chief engineer, whose letters that I was referring to earlier, Audrey Klinkenberg, the assistant county historian, right, Audrey? Audrey actually transcribed it. When the gentleman donated it, I got a transcription. So you could just find a talented person who, so I'll get you Audrey's number if you need it. How's?
Actually, I may want to throw an idea out to Tom and Chris and Andy. One of the better ideas I've seen recently in how to tackle transcription is the Martin Van Buren papers. Jim Bradley, when he did his book, he worked with SUNY Albany to have a graduate class on transcribing the Martin Van Buren papers. So there was like a whole class working on the thing, and then he wrote a book. So anyway, you should do that at Marist University. Should do that.
Tom's the only one that teaches, so we'll support you, sir. You have a question?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the discussion of the stakeholders and pushback.
Yeah.
I think one of the problems occurs with that is when history is presented as a zero-sum game. So if I elevate someone, I deflate someone else. If you can present the story as elevating the other person and recognizing the other person was who they were.
Yep.
That's who they were. They were who they were.
Yep.
Might have been good, might have been bad. We're not commenting on that right now. This is the other person involved, and this was their story. And I think if you can do that, you can avoid the problem. The biggest one I got really annoyed at was the statue of Teddy Roosevelt outside the museum in New York.
Mm-hmm.
We have to remove the statue because the native is not. Both of them are below the horse. Oh, and he's above them. All right. Well, why was that done that way? Why was the statue done that way? So they did try to make an attempt at explaining why the statue was why it might be not nice to do it might. But I noticed that the African was carrying a spear and the American Indian Native American was carrying a rifle. So I mean, it had to be something to that. But I mean, it was never done that way. It was like either or.
Yeah.
You're good or you're bad. And I think that's when people do push back. Yeah. So just tell the story without deflating the other person. That would be a key to I think, a lot of the problems that we do have in trying to tell the whole story.
Yeah, I absolutely love that sentiment. I completely agree, and I think that phrase in itself is like a very succinct way to summarize this, right? That history is not a zero-sum game, and it doesn't take away from one person's story to tell somebody else's story. My mind goes to Sojourner Truth, right? Yes. If a man has a woman's rights, give it back to her, and you will feel better. right? And we can take that same thing and say, well, if you have their history, give it back to them, and you'll probably feel better about yourself after. Yeah, that's a fantastic point. Thank you.
First, let me thank the panel for being here today.
Thank you.
The interpretation of history is political. The erasure of selective history is political. And there's been an attack on the museums and libraries and academia. And just a few days ago, over 200 college and university presidents signed a letter pushing back. So we have on the panel a college person, a local historian, county person, and a state person. My question is, you guys have your ear to the ground. Is the historical element, the historical group, you know, in the United States beginning to coalesce to push back against this? What are you seeing in your field?
You know, it's interesting because I find myself questioning. Early on in my career, I felt like I had to be careful. Our demographic was older people, and so I had to stay out of political stuff. We had one guy, every time I saw him, he'd give us $1,000. He sent us the most offensive anti-immigrant email. I don't even know why. So you don't want to bring it up. But as we get further and further, I just did a presentation in Mamacating a month ago, and it was on the marginalized workers, which the Hudson River Valley Institute were good enough to publish my article on that. It happens my history is all about marginalized peoples. And I'm grappling with how much do I start talking about the current political situation? Well, it wound up in the course, the way I present is I've got pictures, and that's my outline. I don't have anything to read. Maybe I'll quote somebody. Somehow we're talking about, what was it? It was talking about the immigrants and child labor. It was child labor. And I just pointed out we abolished child labor in America in 1938, and it's my bet it was only because they were competing with men at the end of the Great Depression. But then I just couldn't help myself. I said, and now in Florida, we're going to kick out the immigrants, and we're going to put kids back to work. And so, to a certain, and I can't help myself, and I have this discussion with my excellent executive director, Jack. You know, I'm grappling with, I feel like I personally, when I'm out there, have to do more. Just with the people I talk to, that I have an obligation almost. And you do it respectfully. I mean, I found myself talking about immigrants last summer before the election and getting pushback, but you know, my line is always immigrants have never been anything but a net positive in America, a nation of immigrants. Unless you're a little native like I am, I'm 32nd Seneca, inordinately proud of that little bit, right? You know, this land is my land, folks. I didn't mean that. You know, I haven't seen us as an institute, you know, most of us, certainly I'm down in the trenches, small museum, we're just always, but on the other hand, historians get together. I love Ulster County historians, and I see a bunch of you here, my colleagues. What a wonderful bunch of people to work with. We're all kind of on the same side. I don't know that we've gotten to the point of pushback. I think we're all still trying to figure out what's going on. It's just coming at us like boom, 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 boom. I do see, you know, the many protests, and people are starting, like yourself, sir, perfect, history is political. I've been doing some reading recently, and I'm absolutely convinced it was Gerald Horne, who's a black Columbia University professor, the counter-revolution of 1776, and Ned Sublett and his wife, and I'm sorry, girls, I don't remember his name, I should look it up, on the slave breeding industry. Both these books make the comment and the point, root cause of the revolution was the abolishment of enslavement in England. And I never heard this. And every time I tell people, I was on the radio, one of my radio hosts, and I said it to him, and he said, you just blew my mind. And why didn't we ever think about this? Because history is political. I would love to see us, when we talk about the revolution, let's have that conversation. I'm absolutely convinced these people make a really great point. But it's a conversation that right now is getting harder. To a certain degree, I'm proud of being woke, right? You know, I think we have an obligation to get at the truth. Ultimately, it's just going to be really hard in the years coming up, I think.
Yeah, I think that you're correct in suggesting that there is some movement happening of response. So the American Historical Association has issued several responses to the attacks on the IMLS, NEH, at academics level. The Museum Association of New York conference was a few weeks ago in Ithaca, and that was the number one topic on everyone's mind for sure. And they spoke out in the local media. It was picked up by the news. You're seeing the National Council on Public History do the same. American Association of State and Local History is actually suing, part of a lawsuit to sue the administration over the cuts. Because what they're doing, as you all probably know who are working and dealing with these grants, is in many cases they're cutting grants that have already been spent, right? So, which is, the argument could be that that's illegal to do. So the Library Association, the American Alliance of Museums, AASLH, National Council on Public History, as far as I know, they're all joined on this lawsuit at least over IMLS grants. So it is happening, and I think the problem again is the same problem. It's being done for obvious political reasons, right? And I would say that Eddie is noting that he hasn't gotten a lot of pushback on the whole history
this area.
in this area, and that's great. And but what we're seeing at the federal level is the pushback, right? It's all about the administration's desire to go back to the way history was done before, right? And not tell the whole story. So and sanitize or whitewash, whatever terminology you want to use. So it is political, and it's political at the state level. Everything, you're right, everything's political, obviously. So, but we are fortunate right now to, have the support, what we're doing, of not only the state ed department, but the rest of, elected leadership at the state level is pushing back. State ed department pushed back aggressively about the request to remove DEI from school curriculum or any of that, at the risk of losing billions and billions of dollars of federal aid, right? That's the threat. So, these are very high stakes conversations that are happening now that have real relevance in people's lives, like jobs and funding and cuts to, anything you can imagine, including schools. So, it's all part of that. But they've taken, I would say this administration has taken a very aggressive tact to tie these things together with funding, right? And so that's where it comes down. But you are seeing pushback. The results we'll have to see.
Yeah.
I don't know if Tom had.
No, Eddie, you want to go?
Sure.
Feel free.
I was just going to say from the county perspective that I'm glad you mentioned that, I haven't seen pushback at the regional level, but that's not really reflective of what the experience would be on the national level, because I had written down as my answer to this question, I know I need to do more, and I've been privileged to have not had to do more so far. I'm privileged to live and work in Ulster County and to work in New York and to, know that the government that is here at the local level, at the county level, at my town level in New Paltz, is never going to even consider taking these rights away from me, right? And I work on county funding. But one thing I know I need to be better about is supporting our local historic sites, especially because it's just been the last 2 months in which this funding started to really, really take hits at their end. And so it's something I need to do better on. I thank you for raising that question for that reason. But just to mention it all, at the county level as well, I think that's something I'm kind of still parsing out, because an interesting way in which Ulster County's history position was made full-time is I work under the county clerk, which is not required in terms of making it full-time. I don't know about Joanna and Will and Orange and Dutchess. what department they work in.
Where works.
Okay, because what that ends up leading to is kind of a lack of, despite the fact that, I'm blessed to know my funding won't be taken away, I don't necessarily have a choice in getting political about this sort of stuff. My office is currently being sued by the state of Texas, and it's likely to go to the Supreme Court in defense of abortion rights, right? So just yesterday, we had to have a meeting about what our plan is going to be if Robert F. Kennedy Jr. pursues his threat, I'll call it, to make an illegal registry of people on the autism spectrum using public health records. We had to have a meeting yesterday to say, okay, when he comes and asks for them, we're going to tell him to kick rocks, just like we did with the Texas DA. And so it's fascinating, but I haven't necessarily had to have a choice in getting political, but I wanted to just acknowledge that I know I need to do more on the history side of supporting our local historic sites, because sometimes I come from that county perspective, working in the clerk's office on these political things, and I just kind of want to lean back into the comfort of knowing that my funding won't be taken away. But as I'm starting to see that really start to hit a lot of our deeply important historic sites in the region, I think it's going to become more important, something I intend to do better on. Thanks for calling that out.
Yeah, and just very quickly, because this could become a topic in and of itself, and it is obviously a topic in and of itself. So yes, Marist University, the president of Marist University did sign that letter. It's the American Association of Colleges and Universities. President Kevin Wyman signed that. It's now at over 300 colleges and universities in the United States have done so, and more are being added every day. In terms of a couple of the other things there, the Organization of American Historians, I should point out, is not suing the administration, and I'm not so sure they would be in the position to, but have certainly raised the issues of the threat to academic freedom that are revealing itself in a variety of different ways in terms of what's being allowed to be kept on bookshelves at certain government-run organizations and so forth. The final thing I would just very quickly, and this might sound like an attempt to sell our book, but the book that's coming out next year on rethinking the American Revolution in New York is exactly about that. It's 8 chapters. However, there are chapters that go the breadth of traditional military aspects of the revolution to the role of indigenous peoples, the Seneca in particular, the role of enslaved people of African descent in terms of fighting for their freedom. This is a book which was put together in the context of the very diversity of the country, of the 13 colonies and 13 states at that time, is what makes the revolution. And it's really not just an American revolution, it's what Edward Countryman, the Dean of American Revolution Studies, who just passed away last week, had written that it is the American revolutions that actually occurred, since there were so many different groups that participated for different reasons, but that their participation was usually essential for the outcome. So the long and short of all that is, we'll see how the book is reviewed, right, since it is definitely takes a political perspective as well. Thank you. Yes.
Hi, I'm Dave Allen. I teach at the Maritime College in the Bronx, and I teach a graduate level museum studies course and undergrad courses in history. And every one of you, I don't know Eddie, but every one of you have helped my courses. And when I have students, every student is required to do research on a particular tangible artifact. I say the local historical societies are your best information, that you have to get a hold of the local historical societies. They come back and they go, oh my God, I can't believe that place was even in my town. And they're right. So I appreciate everyone here in the room, especially the panel and the rest of you, have helped my students for the last 20 years at least, for sure. And if you need an intern or maybe something transcribed, they're very enthusiastic in the first part of the semester, and then they fall off. But they make some things happen. So I appreciate all this here. Thanks.
Thank you.
I see an hand over there.
Come back.
Hi, my name is Sanford Levy. I've worked with many local museums on many topics, but I'm mostly interested at this point in my life. I've been writing about dead artists from Ulster County, and I'm very happy to announce that Albany Museum is going to do a Julia McEntee Dillon show next February. She was a wonderful Ulster County artist, died in 1919. And I've just published an article on Du Bois Fenelon Hasbrook, another local artist. And if you haven't seen it yet, at Syracuse Press, there's a wonderful new book about two of my favorite artists, Jervis McEntee and Joseph Tubby, and their trip through the Adirondacks up to New Hampshire, and their sketching and writing about, 1910 and the people they meet and the way they went about that. And to me, the art of these people reflects everything we've spoken about today. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My exercise.
Just one of them that's been important to me for the last couple of hours is, and you may not be qualified to answer this, but who made those chocolate brownies back there? Those are good.
Tom did.
So good, yes.
Andy Valente.
Well, I'm wondering, as we're talking about food, that and there's a reception, some things back in the back of the room there. Perhaps if there's no other questions, friendly conversation can continue. Yep, I'm going to pass the mic down, though. There might be another comment or two from our panelists. But thank you all for coming and participating and staying.
I just wanted to thank the High Falls Fire District for letting us use this facility. And I just want to thank all of you, because this was a great event, and it was, like I suspected, that the best part was going to be your questions and the discussion you started. So you should applaud for yourselves, too. Thank you.
I'm going to second that and thank all of you one more time. You might have seen me furiously writing this whole time, but you all gave me about 2.5 pages of notes for me to learn from. Also, just to acknowledge that, right, like, thank you all for not calling me out on the audacity of me sitting up here and thinking I have something to teach any of you. So thank you for all the lessons you gave me today and that I will use in the future. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm not going to thank you all because that's been done, but thank you all. But I want to thank Tom for moderating today and bringing us together. So.